Trading at Schwab is now powered by Ameritrade, giving you even more specialized support than ever before. Like access to the trade desk, our team of passionate traders ready to tackle anything from the most complex trading questions to a simple strategy gut check. Need assistance? No problem. Get 24/7 professional answers and live help, and access support by phone, email, and in-platform chat. That's how Schwab is here for you, to help you trade brilliantly. Learn more at schwab.com/trading.
Nominated as one of the best British true crime podcasts, Murder Mile is hailed as a masterpiece of compelling storytelling. Research using the original police files. Over 300 episodes, Murder Mile has covered hundreds of crimes you won't hear anywhere else, as well as solving cold cases, unearthing new evidence, and even discovering a serial killer no one even knew existed. For a truly original podcast, subscribe to Murder Mile.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Cult Vault podcast, where we take a look at power, manipulation, and the celebrities who blur the line between influence and control. Today, we're kicking off our new episode on questionable celebrities and coercive control with one of the most polarizing public figures of the past decade, Andrew Tate. Whether you know him as a former kickboxer, reality TV dropout, TikTok provocateur, or self-declared top G, the truth behind Andrew Tate's empire is much darker than the flashy cars and cigar smoke might suggest. So who is Andrew Tate? Born in Washington, D.C. in 1986 and raised in the UK, Tate's early life was steeped in rigid gender roles. He often talks about his father being the disciplinarian and his mother being in charge of keeping you alive. Classic binary roles with a toxic twist. He rose to fame in the kickboxing world, even winning a British ISKA championship. But his big public moment came in 2016 when he was kicked off Big Brother after a video surfaced of him beating a woman with a belt. Tate claimed it was consensual. The woman involved backed him up, but Channel 5 didn't buy it, and he was out by day 7. From there, things took a turn. Tate moved to Romania, launched a webcam business with his brother Tristan, and bragged online about making $600,000 a month with over 75 women working for him. He openly called it webcam pimping, and described how women were emotionally manipulated into performing and lying to clients. Sound familiar? Because that's textbook coercive control, grooming, isolation, economic abuse. In 2022, Romanian authorities arrested the Tate brothers. They were charged with rape, human trafficking, and forming an organised crime group. British authorities later added multiple charges, including 10 counts of rape for Andrew and 11 for Tristan. The accusations are horrifying. Choking, psychological intimidation, forcing women into sex work under threats and manipulation. And here's where things get even more disturbing. While all of this was happening, Tate was exploding on TikTok, influencing impressionable young boys on misogyny and hate speech. His videos, often degrading women or ranting about how men should dominate, were being reposted by his followers in the tens of thousands. His program, Hustlers University, was set up like a modern-day pyramid scheme. Pay a monthly fee, learn how to make money online, and, here's the kicker, recruit others by sharing Tate's most controversial clips. The more clicks, the more recruits, the more money. It was a machine, and it worked. This isn't just a story about one man being awful. It's about how systems of coercive control can look slick, attractive, and successful, especially when dressed up as masculine empowerment. Andrew Tate built a cult-like following by weaponizing vulnerability, especially in young men. He sold the idea that control over women equals success, that emotional detachment is power, that if you're not dominating, you're losing. And while Tate awaits trial, his content still circulates, his fan base still grows, the damage is ongoing. Let me be blunt when I say coercive control isn't always as obvious as locked doors or physical violence. It's about manipulation, surveillance, financial domination, emotional blackmail. What Andrew Tate is accused of mirrors patterns we've seen in abusive relationships, and yes, even in so-called therapeutic programs. The rise of Andrew Tate shows how dangerous it can be when charisma, misogyny, and control get platformed without accountability. And it raises the question, are we witnessing influence or indoctrination? And just when you thought the legal saga around Andrew Tate couldn't get more complex, a landmark civil trial is now moving forward in the UK. This case, it's not just about what happened, it's about how it happened and why it matters. 4 women are suing Andrew Tate in the UK High Court for sexual abuse and emotional manipulation. They say they worked in his webcam business. The other 2 say they were pulled into intimate relationships that quickly became exploitative. But here's the legal game changer. This is believed to be the first civil case in the UK where coercive control is being argued as the central mechanism of harm. Anne Studd, a barrister representing the women, described coercive control as a relatively recently identified form of violence, one that slowly erodes a victim's ability to recognise, resist, or escape, even when the abuse isn't physical. It's grooming, it's manipulation, and for many victims, it's invisible until it's too late. The trial will include testimony from Professor Tim Dalgleish, a clinical psychologist at Cambridge, who's expected to explain why victims of sexual violence don't always come forward right away, something Tate's legal team tried to use against the women by arguing the claims are too old. But here's the truth. Delayed reporting is common in coercive situations because the abuse is designed to distort reality and destroy self-trust. This isn't just about Andrew Tate anymore. It's about setting legal precedent, about making space for the courts to recognise psychological abuse and coercive control, not just as private suffering, but as intentional infliction of harm. Tate's team, of course, denies everything. They've called the accusations a pack of lies and objected to expert testimony. But the High Court disagreed, and this case is moving forward, with a 16-day trial scheduled for 2017. So here's the big takeaway. When a civil court, not just the tabloids or TikTok, start using coercive control as a legal lens to examine abuse, that's a shift. That's society catching up to something survivors have been saying for decades. Not all violence is visible, and not all harm leaves bruises. Andrew Tate is a symbol of how easily influence can be used as armor, of how a culture that glamorizes domination can gaslight victims into silence. But this case, it could be a crack in that armor.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. With that kind of money, you could go big time on a fancy water bottle with ultra titanium alloy metal. You're not sure why you need all that. I mean, it just holds water. But you're getting it anyway. Because if you're hiking near an active volcano and you accidentally drop the bottle into molten lava, your water will still be icy cold. Switch to Progressive and you could save big time. For water bottles. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states. Potential savings will vary.
When we talk about coercive control, people often think of locked rooms and raised voices. But sometimes it looks like a joke, a compliment, a charming celebrity with a mic in one hand and a victim in the other. And that could be how some people look at Russell Brand. Once praised for his eccentric genius and unapologetic promiscuity, Brand's public image was crafted around rebellion, wit, and a kind of manic sexual charisma. But beneath the swagger, survivors described something else: grooming, manipulation, and abuse disguised as relationships. Between 2006 and 2013, the height of his fame, Brand is accused by at least 4 women of rape, sexual assault, and emotional abuse. Let's start with the earliest report. In 2006, Russell Brand was 30, a rising star on radio and TV. That year, he allegedly began a relationship with a 16-year-old schoolgirl. Legal? Yes. Ethical? Absolutely not. According to her account, he was controlling from the start. He critiqued her clothes in the middle of Leicester Square, sent a car to pick her up from school, asked her to save his number as Carly so her parents wouldn't know, and disturbingly gave her scripts for how to lie about their relationship. She said she felt isolated, groomed. She called him emotionally and sexually abusive. Another woman, Jordan Martin, says he assaulted her in a hotel in 2007 after finding out she spoke to an ex. She says he ripped her phone apart, touched her without consent, and was emotionally volatile throughout their relationship. She wrote about it in a book in 2014. Russell Brand never sued. In 2012, a woman claims he raped her against a wall after she refused to have sex with one of his friends. She went to a rape treatment centre that same day. 5 months of therapy, contemplated going public, but didn't. But he did text her after, calling his behaviour crazy and selfish. And then, in 2013, another woman, she says she met Brand through Alcoholics Anonymous after starting work together. She claims he pinned her down, tried to undress her, and fired her when she resisted. She later learned someone outside the house heard her screaming and admitted, "We were all scared of him." Let that sink in. Russell Brand had denied all allegations in a video he posted just before the investigation went public in 2023. He says his relationships were always consensual and accused the media of launching a coordinated attack. But let's be clear, this isn't about sex. It's about power. Coercive control often hides in relationships that look consensual on the surface, but behind the scenes there's manipulation, grooming, and intimidation. What's striking in these accounts is not just the abuse itself, but the pattern. Isolation from friends and family, fear of speaking out, emotional volatility, threats of legal action to silence survivors. It's not unlike a cult of personality, where charisma becomes camouflage. And even the industry was complicit. Allegations were raised to Brand's talent agency as early as 2020. They later said that they were horribly misled and cut ties. But how many others have turned a blind eye before that? And how many women were afraid to speak because he was too rich, too famous, too loud to hear over? Brand's case is still under investigation. No convictions have been made, but the testimonies paint a picture not just of an individual but of a system, one that lets fame rewrite the rules of consent, one that confuses charm for safety, one where "she didn't say no" is treated like a hall pass for harm. I always find it interesting when celebrities or people in positions of power are under scrutiny and they suddenly find religion. That's another piece of armor they will put on themselves to protect themselves from further scrutiny. When we talk about coercive control, let's remember, it's not about what you see on the surface, it's about the space between yes and safety, between truth and power, and how easily that space can be filled with fear. Russell Brand always described himself as the naughty boy, the wild one, the provocateur. But by 2023, the jokes had worn thin, because what once passed for eccentricity was now being investigated as something much darker: sexual assault, grooming, emotional abuse, coercive control. In September 2023, a joint investigation by The Times, Sunday Times, and Channel 4 dispatches revealed allegations from 4 women spanning 2006 to 2013. The BBC's own January 2025 report was damning. It found that staff had felt unable to raise complaints about Brand's behaviour during his tenure, a toxic mix of fear, hierarchy, and celebrity power. Benijay's review echoed the same. Informal concerns were ignored, and troubling behaviour went unreported or unaddressed by Brand's time working on shows like Big Brother's Big Mouth and Kings of Comedy. In response, the BBC wrote its guidelines in mid-2024, with one line hitting especially hard: using celebrity status to influence people to make a decision in your favour is an abuse of power. It is. Because what we're seeing again and again is how fame doesn't just protect predators, it enables them. Think about it. A 16-year-old girl groomed, hidden behind code names and scripts to lie to her parents. A woman allegedly raped after refusing to participate in sex with Brand's friend. An extra on a movie set in 2010 who says she was sexually assaulted and later silenced. Years pass. Power accumulates. Careers get protected. And women once again disappear behind headlines that focus more on him than on them. Or, worse, blame the victims, and Brand feels more untouchable than ever. Brand says these allegations are very, very hurtful, that this is all media hysteria. But here's what hurts more: staff being too afraid to report, survivors still waiting for justice, and a cultural industry that enables predatory behaviour, calling it edgy. Right now, prosecutors are considering formal charges, and police continue to investigate. But the most uncomfortable truth might already be out in the open. Russell Brand wasn't just enabled by his fame, he was insulated by it. There's a lesson here, not just one about the harm one man can do, but about what happens when systems fail to hold powerful people accountable, when charisma overrides concern, when laughter silences reporting, when institutions choose profit over protection. Because the damage isn't just done by the abuser, it's done by every gatekeeper who decided not to look. For some people, the question isn't, did they do it? It's, how are they still getting away from it?
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. With that kind of money, you could go big time on a fancy water bottle with ultra titanium alloy metal. You're not sure why you need all that. I mean, it just holds water. But you're getting it anyway. Because if you're hiking near an active volcano and you accidentally drop the bottle into molten lava, your water will still be icy cold. Switch to Progressive and you could save big time. For water bottles. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states. Potential savings will vary.
So let's talk about Chris Brown. For over 15 years, Brown has been the centre of a dizzying number of abuse allegations. He's been accused of domestic violence, rape, intimidation, and violent outbursts. And yet, he's still headlining stadiums, trending on TikTok, and topping the charts. Why? Because Chris Brown is the perfect case study in cultural tolerance for harm, especially when it's packaged with talent, a few apologies, and a good beat. Let's start where the public outrage began in 2009. Brown was just 19 when he beat then-girlfriend Rihanna so badly she was hospitalized. Photos of her bruised face were leaked. He pled guilty, he apologized, he went to court-ordered therapy. Media pieces also released articles saying Rihanna had also hurt Chris Brown, and then there were discussions of mutual abuse. And let's not get carried away with that term. Toxic relationships are difficult to discuss. Mutual abuse doesn't exist. One person will react in response to feeling threatened for the abuse they are experiencing at the hands of the perpetrator. It is not mutual abuse. Somehow, the public seemed to forgive him faster than she did. Since then, the pattern has never really stopped. It just evolved. In 2013, Chris Brown was charged with assault in DC after punching a man outside a hotel. In 2017, a woman sued Brown after allegations that she was sexually assaulted at a party at his house where, according to the suit, women were intimidated using guns and drugs. Another woman says she was raped by Chris Brown on P. Diddy's yacht in Miami. She sues him for $20 million. The case is dismissed, but not because she was disproven. It was dropped after Brown's team presented text suggesting ongoing communication. And now, in 2025, Brown recently sat in a Manchester jail, denied bail, after allegedly smashing a man in the head with a tequila bottle in a London nightclub, then stomping on him while he lay unconscious. The victim? Producer Abe Dior. The damage? Grievous bodily harm. The pattern? Predictable. So let's be clear again, these aren't isolated moments. This is a portfolio of violence, the kind that could destroy most people's careers. But Brown's? He keeps touring, keeps collaborating, keeps collecting Grammys. And he knows it. He said it outright, that they always try to pull some bullshit when I'm dropping music. It's not paranoia, it's calculated dismissal. The idea that anyone who questions him is trying to sabotage him rather than hold him accountable. The sense of untouchability is not born out of ego alone, it's cultivated by fans who chant "Free Breezy," by industry executives who stay quiet, and by a media machine that keeps calling these incidents troubles instead of trauma. In 2024, ID released Chris Brown, A History of Violence, a documentary that laid out decades of allegations from women and former associates. Within months, Brown sued Warner Brothers for $500 million, calling it defamation. He says he was being painted as a serial rapist, a term he says doesn't fit. But here's the question. If the pattern's there, does the label even matter anymore? Here's what is clear. Brown's behavior shows signs of coercive control. Not just physical violence, but emotional manipulation, intimidation, and calculated erasure of autonomy. In at least one case, a survivor claimed Brown gave her a drink, after which her memory started to get weird. That story echoes countless ones we've heard this season. Stories where consent gets rewritten, where power masks as charm. And yet he's still selling out shows, he's still protected, he's still powerful. When we keep excusing the abuser because we like the artist, we are part of the harm. When we treat rape allegations as PR storms, not life-altering violations, we are part of the harm. And when we keep saying that was so long ago while victims are still trying to piece themselves back together, we are part of the harm. Chris Brown may be facing legal action today, but he's been free to cause damage for years because we let him, because we looked away, because we cared more about a comeback than a cost. The question now isn't just will he be held accountable, it's what took so long.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. With that kind of money, you could go big time on a fancy water bottle with ultra titanium alloy metal. You're not sure why you need all that. I mean, it just holds water. But you're getting it anyway. Because if you're hiking near an active volcano and you accidentally drop the bottle into molten lava, your water will still be icy cold. Switch to Progressive and you could save big time. For water bottles. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states. Potential savings will vary.
The moment that stops you. A photo, a headline, a glance that feels off. For many people, it happened at the 2022 Grammys. Olivia Rodrigo, 18 years old, smiling in conversation with Jared Leto, then 50. And Twitter exploded. Olivia, run! Stay away from her, Jared. But this wasn't just an awkward red carpet photo. It was about years of allegations. A whisper network that's been growing louder for nearly 2 decades and still hasn't pierced Hollywood's protective bubble. It's time we talk again about Jared Leto. Leto isn't just an Oscar-winning actor or frontman of 30 Seconds to Mars. He's also a method actor known for crossing the lines in the name of the craft. But behind the scenes, the stories are there. Not just about strange behavior, but about grooming, coercion, and alleged sexual assault. And the pattern? It starts young. As far back as 2005, sources told the New York Post that Leto was constantly texting underage girls, 16 and 17 years old, calling him a serial texter. In 2018, actor Dylan Sprouse called him out on X, asking, now that you've slid into the DMs of every single female model aged 18 to 25, what would you say your success rate is? To which director James Gunn replied, saying, he starts at 18 on the internet? That wasn't a joke. It was a warning. Multiple women have come forward online anonymously to describe encounters with Leto that they say crossed into abuse, especially when they were teenagers. One woman says she met him on a film set in New York when she was 17. He was 34. She alleges that he pressured her into sexual acts she wasn't ready for. Then he coerced her. He was rough. That the relationship wasn't romantic. It was predatory. He allegedly asked her to say she was 14 or 15 during sex. Again, let's let that sink in. And this wasn't a one-time event, she says. The alleged abuse continued until she was 21. And some people will say, well, why did she carry on? Why didn't she walk away? And we need to look at the power imbalances. We need to look at the fear and the intimidation that comes with coercive control. Another woman wrote that she believed he got pleasure out of hurting her, that she didn't realise at the time what was happening because she was too young to understand coercion. And oftentimes that may be a reason why somebody continues to be abused. It is not the victim's fault. It's all the blame lies on the perpetrator. This is what sexual coercion looks like. It's not always physical force, but power imbalances, emotional pressure, grooming, manipulation, repeatedly asking, never listening, making someone feel like saying no isn't an option. So how can sex ever be consensual? How can sexual acts ever be consensual? That's without looking at the coercive control. That's just with looking at the power imbalance. And Jared Leto, he's had that power for decades. He's a rock star, a movie star, a millionaire, a man who's turned questionable behavior into quirky headlines. Is it method acting gone too far? He allegedly gave condoms to his Suicide Squad co-stars, and when he was asked about it, he said it was a joke. Just like the 30 Seconds to Mars cult, which he also laughed off, saying, yes, this is a cult, and then later made out it was a joke, even though fans were literally flown to a private island to dress in white robes and follow him around. But here's the thing, when everything becomes a joke, nothing gets taken seriously, including the survivors. Jared Leto has never been formally charged. These allegations remain uninvestigated, untried, unaddressed in any real way, but they keep coming up, whispered in forums, mentioned in tweets, erased from message boards. Because that's how this works. A woman speaks up, the story disappears, and the man keeps walking red carpets. We're not here to try Jared Leto. We're here to ask why no one else has. How many rumours does it take? How many women need to say they were groomed, hurt, or silenced before we stop calling it controversial and start calling it what it is, a pattern of abuse enabled by silence? Jared Leto still headlines festivals, still walks into rooms where no one asks questions, still speaks to 18-year-old pop stars on red carpets without consequence. Because in Hollywood, if you're talented enough, rich enough, strange enough, people just won't look away. They'll call it art. There's something deeply seductive about the idea of transformation, about belonging, about following someone who seems to hold the key to something bigger than you. And I think Jared Leto knows that. He's not just an actor or a rock star, he's a brand, a guru, a so-called spiritual figure, especially to his most loyal fans. But in 2025, it's no longer about method acting or eccentric fashion. It's what Airmail is now calling the cult of Leto. Let's rewind to Mars Island 2019. A private resort off the coast of Croatia. Fans, mostly young women, paid more than $6,499 to wear flowing kaftans, chant, meditate, and follow Jared Leto through pine forests in near silence. Photos from the retreat show him in white robes and mirrored sunglasses, arms stretched wide as followers mimic his pose below. It was sold as a spiritual retreat, but to others it looked like a cult. One of the band's own tweets, yes, this is a cult, #Mars Island. And now, with 9 women accusing Leto of sexual misconduct, that cult aesthetic isn't just a gimmick, it's part of a broader pattern, one where power, charisma, and trust are leveraged for control. According to survivors, Leto allegedly sought out young, impressionable girls on the island, some underage, using his celebrity to build instant authority. He didn't just pursue them, he groomed them and pushed boundaries and normalized coercion. He didn't need to be violent, he was idolized, and that's what makes it dangerous, because cults don't need temples or robes. Sometimes they look like fandoms, like retreats, like concerts, like community. Experts in cult behavior and coercive control have pointed out that what Leto built through 30 Seconds to Mars, through Mars Island, through his image as an untouchable artist, mirrors the tactics of high-control groups. Isolation from the outside world. Deification of a single leader, financial exploitation, emotional dependency, sexual access framed as spiritual closeness. None of this has happened in a vacuum. Allegations span over 20 years, and now 9 brave women have come forward to accuse Jared Leto of sexual misconduct. Finally, people will take a look at this man and question whether it is fame and eccentricity or whether it is abuse. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a celebrity as cult leadership. We're looking at coercion in the language of connection. And we're looking at abuse disguised as transformation. And we have to ask, if this is a cult, how many people got hurt while they were calling it marketing?
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. With that kind of money, you could go big time on a fancy water bottle with ultra titanium alloy metal. You're not sure why you need all that. I mean, it just holds water. But you're getting it anyway. Because if you're hiking near an active volcano and you accidentally drop the bottle into molten lava, your water will still be icy cold. Switch to Progressive and you could save big time. For water bottles. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states. Potential savings will vary.
It's not always men. Statistically, coercive control is a gendered crime. where men will perpetrate against women, but occasionally some women will pose as women's rights advocates, as pro-women activists. But what happens when empowerment becomes obedience, when a spiritual practice meant to heal the body becomes a weapon used to control it? And that's where I want to talk about One Taste. This week, in a landmark decision, 2 executives from the so-called orgasmic meditation company were convicted of forced labor conspiracy, including its founder, Nicole Daedone. Behind the flowy language and sensual branding was a dark truth. One Taste wasn't just a wellness company. According to federal prosecutors, it was a sexually exploitive cult built on coercion, surveillance, and psychological manipulation. From 2006 to 2018, One Taste taught thousands that orgasmic meditation, a 15-minute practice involving the stimulation of a woman's clitoris, could unlock spiritual enlightenment, financial freedom, and even trauma healing. But in court, prosecutors described a system where the same practice was used to recruit vulnerable women, often with histories of sexual trauma, coerce them into performing acts, including on investors and clients, force employees into communal living, constant surveillance and unpaid labor, and intimidate them into financial ruin through high-cost retreats and courses. This was not about women or women's liberation. This was about control. Let's call it what it is: industrialized coercion, dressed in mindfulness marketing. And there is so much of this around at the moment. Witnesses testified that employees were manipulated into servicing men sexually as part of company duties. They worked long hours for little or no pay. They were assigned beds, told when and how to eat, indoctrinated, pressured to ignore their instincts, told their trauma was a gateway to transformation. One employee was told her rape history made her a perfect candidate for orgasmic meditation. Another testified she was shamed for not performing well during a sexual act, as if she had failed her boss spiritually. This is coercive control in its most insidious form, when abuse is framed as awakening, as recovery, as supportive, when women are taught that the price of empowerment is silence, submission, and sex on command. And it's not a new story. We've seen it with Nexium, with Bikram Yoga, with Synanon, and now again with One Taste. Nicole Daedone once gave a TEDx talk about liberating women through orgasm. That video has over 2.3 million views. In it, she tells a story of a man stimulating her at a party, uninvited, and how it changed her life. The whole idea of One Taste, in that case, was built on sexual violence and sexual abuse. Now she faces up to 20 years in prison for turning that story into a system of exploitation. Even now, the rebranded One Taste, called the Institute of On Foundation, is still operating, still marketing, still featuring Daedone on its website. Their PR rep says the conviction is an attack on freedom of speech, that it criminalizes belief, that this is just unconventional spirituality. But again, belief isn't the problem. Coercion is. This isn't about kink. This isn't about non-traditional healing. It's about using power to erase choice. And in the end, that's what every story in this series is about. How coercive control thrives when it's wrapped in charisma or cloaked in ideology or justified by a higher purpose. So when we hear consciousness or surrender or expansion, let's ask who profits, who's in control, and who gets hurt when no one is allowed to say no. Sentencing for this case will take place in September. And until then, I do have some interviews lined up with One Taste survivors and several already available on the Cult Vault podcast if you'd like to learn more about One Taste and the journey of recovery the survivors have been on.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. With that kind of money, you could go big time on a fancy water bottle with ultra titanium alloy metal. You're not sure why you need all that. I mean, it just holds water. But you're getting it anyway. Because if you're hiking near an active volcano and you accidentally drop the bottle into molten lava, your water will still be icy cold. Switch to Progressive and you could save big time. For water bottles. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states. Potential savings will vary.
For decades, Sean Diddy Combs was seen as an architect of hip-hop culture, a mogul, a visionary, even a role model. But behind the grand, behind the beats, behind the Billboard hits, another story was unfolding. One of unchecked power, systemic violence, and silence brought on with fear. In 2023, a single lawsuit cracked the dam. Cassie Ventura, Combs' ex-partner, filed a bombshell complaint accusing him of a decade of abuse, including rape, trafficking, and physical violence. That lawsuit was settled in under 24 hours, but the floodgates were open. Since then, more than 30 civil suits have been filed. Federal agents raided his homes. Prosecutors have unsealed a racketeering indictment that reads like a blueprint for a criminal enterprise, built not on drugs or weapons, but on coercion, trafficking, and sexual control. The details are harrowing. Allegations of drugging and raping underage girls and boys, claims that he filmed assaults and distributed footage across the industry, a lawsuit accusing him of dangling a woman over a 16th floor balcony, another from a male escort who says Combs assaulted and threatened him. Multiple survivors say they were trafficked, blackmailed, and filmed without consent. Combs has denied all allegations. He's pleaded not guilty. He's called it a witch hunt. His lawyers argue that this is a trial by media, not due process. But here's what the public can't ignore. The stories keep coming. This isn't just about one man. Again, it's about the system, the industry, that let him operate like this for years. But why? Because he had money, or because he had lawyers, or because he had a brand, because he had people believing that the power was proof of innocence, or because he had so much blackmailing material and collateral on those involved with him in the industry, or because the music industry, like many others, has a long history of looking away when women or queer people or other vulnerable individuals such as children are harmed by its stars. And let's talk about that video. In 2024, CNN published security footage from 2016 showing Diddy assaulting Cassie in a hotel hallway, dragging her, kicking her, throwing objects, the same incident she had described in chilling detail in her lawsuit. He apologized on camera 2 days later, calling it his darkest time, claimed he'd been in therapy and that he was disgusted by himself. But here's the thing, accountability isn't a performance. It's not a 70-second Instagram reel. It's not finding Jesus and claiming to be reborn and hiding behind that as your scapegoat. And it doesn't start when you get caught. You shouldn't just apologize because you've been caught. As of today, Diddy is in federal custody. He's been denied bail multiple times. His trial for sex trafficking and racketeering is underway, and prosecutors allege that for 20 years he ran a criminal enterprise where sexual violence was a tool of control, and people, often vulnerable, often young, were used, discarded, and silenced, and it wasn't just him. The lawsuit names assistants, bodyguards, producers. It was an open secret, and it was a culture. One attorney claims that they've been contacted by over 3,000 people who describe similar patterns of abuse. So where do we go from here? We honour survivors by listening, not just to the high-profile cases, but to the patterns beneath them. We interrogate the systems that protected men like Combs and ask what we're still protecting today, who we're still protecting today. And we remind ourselves that this is not just about celebrity. It's about power, how it's wielded, how it's worshipped, and how, when left unchecked, it becomes a weapon. As the criminal trial of Sean Diddy Combs begins in New York, jurors have heard about racketeering, trafficking, and abuse. But one term they won't hear is coercive control. And that's not an accident. Judge Aaron Subramanian ruled in pretrial motions that expert witnesses can't use that phrase in court. And why? Because in New York, unlike in only 7 other states in the United States of America, coercive control is not legally defined as a form of domestic abuse. What Diddy is accused of, the surveillance, the threats, the financial control, the psychological manipulation, is coercive control. The term was coined by forensic social worker Evan Stark, who compared its tactics used to those on prisoners of war: isolation, humiliation, forced dependency, and control of every facet of life. Of course, we understand that's what happens in cults, but it's happening in other systems too. It's abuse without bruises, and it's often harder to prosecute, but no less damaging. In Diddy's case, prosecutors allege that he used his wealth, influence, and celebrity to exert this kind of control over his alleged victims. These weren't just isolated incidents of violence. There was a pattern, a system of domination. And yet legally, it's invisible. That invisibility is powerful and dangerous. Because when we can't name what's happening, we start to ask the wrong questions. Why didn't they leave? Why did they go back? Why didn't they say anything sooner? The answers survivors and trauma specialists will tell you often lie in coercive control. The psychological bonds, the trauma bonds, the financial threat, the fear that saying no will get you punished or destroyed. As clinical social worker Christine Cocciola puts it, the brain itself becomes trauma bonded to the abuser. You no longer recognize what's healthy or even what's real. Dr. Lisa Fontes, author of Invisible Chains, says it simply. People can lose their perspective when they are under the thumb of an abusive person. And in this case, that person was one of the most powerful men in entertainment. Someone with private jets, armed security, NDAs, and a media empire at his disposal. So while the jury may not hear the phrase coercive control, you can be sure its presence will echo throughout this trial. And hopefully it will nudge the state of New York into implementing some coercive control laws.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. With that kind of money, you could go big time on a fancy water bottle with ultra titanium alloy metal. You're not sure why you need all that. I mean, it just holds water. But you're getting it anyway. Because if you're hiking near an active volcano and you accidentally drop the bottle into molten lava, your water will still be icy cold. Switch to Progressive and you could save big time. For water bottles. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states. Potential savings will vary.
Through stories of manipulation masked as mentorship, or luxury offered as leverage, or fear disguised as love, the legal system might not have caught up with this kind of abuse, but we can. We can stop asking why survivors stayed and start asking who made it impossible to leave. If you or someone you know is experiencing coercive control or abuse, you are not alone. Visit thehotline.org or call 800-799-SAFE for confidential help in the USA, or visit Safe Lives or Women's Aid in the UK. Their websites have a ton of resources that could be helpful. Across every story we've explored today, from the orgasmic meditation empire of One Taste to the celebrity sanctuaries of Russell Brand to the ongoing trial of Sean Diddy Combs, one thread connects them all: power, and the quiet violence of how it's used. We've heard about coercive environments disguised as wellness retreats, about grooming, psychological manipulation, and consent blurred by fame, age, and fear. About men who built entire systems to protect themselves, from cultish fan bases to billion-dollar media empires, while silencing those they harmed. The legal term coercive control may not always appear in courtrooms or headlines, but in the testimonies of survivors. It's everywhere. It's in the producer who promised protection and delivered isolation, in the artist who used status to seduce, humiliate, and dominate, in the group that turned intimacy into indoctrination. Coercive control is not about individuals, it's about systems. It thrives in cultures that reward charisma over accountability. It persists in industries where the powerful are rarely questioned and the harmed are often disbelieved unless they bleed. And that's why we have to name it. Because when we don't, survivors are left asking themselves, was that abuse if he never hit me? Was I crazy for staying? Did I say no loud enough? We need new language to understand how abuse really works, not just through broken bones, but through broken boundaries, not just with fists, but with fear, financial ruin, and forced silence. Until we name coercive control, we remain complicit in it. If this episode has resonated with you, if it's challenged you on what you thought abuse looked like, I encourage you to share that. Share it with me, share it with your friends and family, share it with your neighbours. These stories can be so hard to tell, but harder still is the silence that surrounds them. Thank you so much for listening. I know that the majority of my listeners will already know all of this stuff, and I'm so thankful for you always tuning in. My name is Casey, and I'm the host of the Cult Vault podcast, where we uncover the hidden systems of power, control, and survival. So until next time, stay safe, stay critical, and stay connected.